Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Drogemeyer, for being here. Good morning. I want to start and probably spend my whole time on the implementation of SASTA through the J-Corps Research Security Subcommittee. And thank you for the work that you've done standing that up and kind of pushing that forward. That was a bill that I was pleased to introduce, and to see it, the fruits of that labor are exciting in a lot of ways. But first, with the line of questioning, I want to start by asking you to help us frame the China challenge specifically at the research institutions. How are they actually going in and influencing the policies at the universities as well as stealing the technology?
No, it's a great question. So it actually takes many forms. One form is the fundamental issue of academic freedom. So sometimes you have individuals there coming in and pushing back against certain folks who are being invited to campus to talk. Maybe they're from Tibet or whatever. So there's that dimension. Another dimension that we've seen is, for example, taking a proposal which is a very well-conceived, highly rated proposal and sending it to China. We have evidence of this so that others over there could act on it before our own investigators have a chance to act on it. And sometimes they're groups of people that get together and they agree to review a proposal poorly, so it actually won't get funded here, and you take that really highly rated proposal and send it over to China. Another thing, of course, is actually taking physical materials. We've already seen this, vials of biological agents and things like that are taken. Sharing intellectual property, taking photographs of things, for example, that are export controlled. So there's a whole variety of ways, from undermining the fundamental integrity of the openness of our research enterprise vis-a-vis academic freedom, to specific activities that seek to grab hold of particular things of interest to the Chinese Communist Party.
So using our own values of academic freedom against us in some ways, right? What percentage of the theft is conducted directly by folks who are a part of talent programs, as opposed to outside of talent programs but still connected to the Chinese government?
That's a great question. We don't really have specific data on that. I think one of the things that we are seeing is that the talent programs that go by a particular name, they tend to morph. They tend to go underground. They're a little bit like a virus. It morphs and it changes. And so we're remaining vigilant to that. And also, I think, really trying to educate folks. This is something we've done in our subcommittee, develop best practices, examples of contracts of what the language actually says, and says, if you're a part of this talent program, you agree to share this information, you agree to not disclose it to a federal agency or things like that. It's completely antithetical to our values. Yeah.
But you said, and I think this is right, that the names of these things morph and they go underground, right? So I guess I have a little bit of a concern on the reliance of the disclosure specifically, because two things. One, it's a self-disclosure, right? But then the second is, if you're asking about specific talent programs, they could just change the name tomorrow. Right. So kind of help me get more comfort around that.
No, you're absolutely right. And disclosure is a really big issue in this issue of self-disclosure. It's been that way for a long time. So number one, universities are ramping up their use of these disclosures much more dramatically. Number two, there has to be periodic audits of these things, just like getting pulled out of the TSA
Is that happening
security
today?
We're setting up to do that with 54 FBI field offices. Universities are not set up to do that. They don't have the information. So the audits need to be done by law enforcement. The third thing I would say is that we want to make sure that this stuff is actually shared. And sometimes you can't share information, say, from a university to a federal agency to a private company, and people kind of go underground, they hide by changing institutions, and legally that information can't be shared. So we're looking now at mechanisms, legal mechanisms, or possibly coming to Congress and saying we need to change the laws, because if you're not sharing the information, then sometimes people can skirt the rules, and we can't have that.
And I trust you'll update us on any changes that are
absolutely. And anytime you want to have an update, we're happy to come over and do that. And again, thank you. You've given some tremendous input. I met with some members the other day. Very, very helpful input, and we always welcome that.
Great. Again, I'll end with what I started with. I thank you for your work on this. It's a major initiative. I'm somebody who thinks we should be increasing our research across the board and making sure we're always at the cutting edge. But alongside of that, we have to secure.
Right.
And I know that that's a mandate that you share. So
absolutely.
With that, I thank you and I yield back.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Ms. Weston.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Dr. Drogemeyer, for joining us here today.
Sure.
Dr. Drogemeyer, are you familiar with the Economic Research Service and the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, both within USDA? Are you familiar with those?
I've heard of it, but I wouldn't say I'm familiar with it.
So I will let you know a little bit about what they
Okay.
do. These are two research agencies within the USDA. The Economic Research Service, or ERS, is USDA's science arm, and it produces statistical analyses to inform policy and industry decisions with real impacts on farmers, consumers, rural communities, and natural resources. The National Institutes of Food and Agriculture, or NIFA.
Yeah, that I know. I know
It
NIFA.
funds hundreds of millions of dollars in research grants for agricultural concerns and best practices, things of that nature. So you're aware of that?
I'm aware of NIFA, yeah.
Okay, so are you aware that last year these two agencies were relocated from Washington DC to Kansas City?
Yes.
And that was done on an expedited basis, correct?
I just know they were relocated, yeah. I don't know if it's expedited or not, but.
Did you know that they've been operating with a skeleton crew ever since that relocation took place?
I've heard something along those lines, yeah. That they haven't been able to bring in as many people to restaff.
In fact, at least 75% of the staff has left, including all of the publishing staff at ERS and all of the grants management at NIFA. And as of last month, ERS had 180 vacancies to fill due to the mass attrition from the expedited agency move. So there's been not only a big loss of workforce, but a huge brain drain from those agencies. And at the time the move that was proposed, Secretary Perdue justified it by saying it would ensure that USDA was, quote, the most effective, most efficient, and most customer-focused agency in the federal government. And OMB Director Mick Mulvaney referred to the federal employees quitting en masse as a wonderful way to streamline government and do what we haven't been able to do in a long time. So now the president's current budget request for ERS includes a decrease of $22.6 million, or more than a quarter of its budget from last year for ERS. Almost 70% of that cut comes directly from further proposed reductions to full-time staff in ERS from 329 to 187 positions. So Dr. Drogemeyer, has the departure of hundreds of employees from ERS and NIFA, which Mr. Mulvaney referred to as a wonderful thing, improved the function of federal science at USDA?
I honestly don't have enough information to answer the question, but I appreciate your explanation there. I would have to, get more information to really thoughtfully answer that, because I really don't know. I haven't looked at the science output and what the staffing levels are and need to be, and these things tend to get complicated when you look more in detail at them. So, but I'm happy to do that.
Well, if all of the grants management staff has left NIFA, does that make it pretty likely that they're not able to manage grants?
Well, it depends on if that function has been transferred somewhere else. Given the fact that they were moved, maybe that function exists somewhere else. So, again, I'd have to really look at the big picture to see, but I'm happy to do that.
So is OSTP doing anything to support ERS and NIFA in rebuilding the full science capacity of both these agencies?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, will you commit to do something about that?
Certainly
or-
look into that. Yeah, I'm aware of it, but, they are a cabinet-level agency, so they certainly have freedom to manage their department, but I'm happy to be helpful however I can.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
And both these agencies have vacancies in key leadership positions right now. The ERS administrator and multiple top-level science leadership positions at NIFA remain vacant or acting. So would you agree that these temporary appointments and vacancies are limiting the representation of USDA science efforts, and specifically the NSTC Committee on Science?
Honestly, I couldn't answer that today as I sit here, but I'd really love to get schooled up on this and learn more and be able to answer that.
Absolutely. If you would please look into it and
Sure.
report back about your findings, because this is really important, and it's been a big attack on science and
Okay.
as science and technology policy